Welcome to Carter's Retro Reviews. Today we're going to be reviewing a Fighters Megamix for the Saturn. Now, this is the only game in my whole collection where I not only have the PAL copy, but I also have, that's right, the US copy as well. And both of them are actually in pretty good nick, so before we get to review that, I'd like to try something quickly if I can, and that is to do exactly that again. I just want to do the intro, but instead of actually saying the name of the game, I'm actually just going to mouth it and then edit in later the name of the game. Welcome to Carter's Retro Reviews. Today we're going to be reviewing Fuck My Penis. Alright, let's see how that goes. Recently I reviewed Virtua Fighter Kids. Truth be told, I reviewed that game so I could review this one. It was made by Sega and one of the few fighters designed for the console and never got an arcade release. It did get a port to the game.com if that means anything, which it doesn't. It really doesn't. One of the biggest aspects of the game is the sheer volume of characters. It's practically Sega's version of Mugen before Mugen was ever a thing. I'm going to go through this list as fast as I can. From the Virtua Fighter series we have Akira, Pai or Pei or however you fucking say it, Lau, Wolf, Jeffrey, Kage, which is how I'm told it's pronounced, not Cage, Sarah, Jackie, Shun, Lion and Dural. From Fighting Vipers we have Grace, Barn, Raxel, Tokyo, Sandman, Jane, Honey, which got renamed to Candy in the American and European versions, Piki, Marla, BM, Yuraban and Kuma-chan, aka Panda-chan. In addition to this, you can unlock the following characters: Bark the Polar Bear, Bean the Dynamite, Deku, Janet from Virtual Cop 2, a Kid Akira and Kid Sarah from Virtual Fighter Kids, Rant to Hero, Siba, which was supposed to be in the original Virtual Fighter, Mr. Meat, which can be unlocked when you boot the game up 30 times, AM2 Palm Tree when you've played 84 hours of the game, and Hornet the car from Daytona. Surely by now, if you've ever heard one thing about this game, is that Sega's character department were either desperate or on heavy drugs, or both, and thought that this idea of a car as a selectable character was a good idea. It's certainly a novelty if nothing else, and gets people talking about the game, which can be seen as a positive, I guess. In the same way that people talk about that tone-deaf ditz, Rebecca Black. So prepare your tits as we dive balls deep into the emotional circle jerk that is Fighters Megamix. To begin with, we get a nice intro video, which by this stage I wouldn't expect anything less from Sega. The menu system is tidy, sharp, practical, and looks pretty good overall. The options we have in the menu is a pretty standard fare, although the option to choose between Virtua Fighter and Fighting Vipers is a really nice addition, and that gets big points. Whenever you do a mashup like this, I'm always wary of in-game presentation because the developers tend to choose one of the games that it's based off of. But this game has done a really good job of incorporating both, and yet neither at the same time. Kinda using each as a template for a new game, which is exactly what this is. While it wasn't the last 3D fighter from Sega for the Saturn, it still looks really good, and everything including backgrounds looks better than their original titles, with super crisp and sharp visuals. Graphically for its time, this would be absolutely first rate and would have kept a lot of people who'd bought the console very happy. I will make special mention of the fact that both the background and the foreground detailing is particularly excellent. Sound effects are spot on, and the soundtrack is also absolutely excellent. I wish I had more to say on it, but it just ticks all the boxes across the board. Gameplay is an interesting fusion of both games. If you've ever played either Fighting Vipers or Virtua Fighter, this gives the impression that very little has changed. But there are no longer ring outs, and Virtua Fighter characters have new moves taken from Virtua Fighter 3. On top of this, the most impressive feature was the dodge move, which allowed characters to sidestep, avoiding a dangerous blow and opening at the same time room for a counter. Sega capitalized on this, calling Fighters Megamix the first real 3D fighting game in the market. Thank you, Wiki. This one game mechanic does work in the game's favour, as I did use it on occasion and sometimes I found it necessary. Controls are tighter than two fat guys sharing a toilet cubicle, and the surprise would be if they weren't. Button layout is how you would expect, and everything feels really good. Replay value is actually kind of a big deal with this game, especially considering for me, fighting games very rarely keep me playing for any longer than finishing the game with one or two characters at a time, only for me to come back to it later if it's any good. But this is one of the very few games I've played where you're constantly unlocking shit that makes not only the enjoyable gameplay worth it, but you're unlocking new characters to use and beat. It starts off with 4 rows of characters to choose from: Nova's Trial, Virtual Fighter, Fighting Vipers and Girls. Once you've finished each subsection, you unlock new rows of opponents such as Muscle, Smart Guys, Dirty Fighters, Bosses and Secrets. Regardless on how you feel about Street Fighter 4, the game does exactly the same with unlocking even small things like different outfits and new characters, so the fact that this game was doing it many years before is amazing. Would I recommend this game? I'm not speaking hyperbole when I say that no Saturn collection is of any worth without Fighter's Megamix in it. Your collection means literally nothing without this game. For fighting fans, it's a yes. For non-fighting fans, this is the definitive fighting game for the Saturn. I rank this up there with DOA and Last Bronx. I cannot think of a better fighting game for not just the Saturn, but for this era on home consoles. The N64's fighting library was a joke, and while the PS1 had its hand at some really awesome fighters, this is up there with Street Fighter vs X-Men and the highly regarded Saturn port for Street Fighter Alpha 3.